everyone, and welcome back to the Used Car Industry Summit and our live stage sessions presented by SYCN Auto Logistics. And our next guest here on the live stage is one of the longtime kind friends of Cherokee Media Group, Tarry Shebesta, who is the CEO of FlexPath DXP. Tarry, it's great to see you again, my friend. How are you, sir?
I'm perfect, Nick. How about you? And I appreciate the opportunity of being here with you guys in this great event.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, indulge me with a quick lifestyle question. As folks may or may not know, cooking is one of your passions, along with technology and automotive. Just what have been some tasty dishes you've cooked recently?
Yeah, well, I do like to cook. It's kind of the left half, right half of the brain, I guess. You know, you got the tech side, and then all of a sudden you've got the creative side, which is cooking and guitars. But one of my favorite dishes is veal parmesan, and it's just a crazy, but it's always something new with new ingredients and different ingredients. You find things like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. So yeah, it's a creative side.
Very nice.
Sure.
Very nice. Well, we'll weave that into our conversation as we get cooking here.
Yeah.
Delving into the world of used vehicle leasing, something that want to lean into your background and industry experiences. Used car leasing, for whatever reason, just hasn't really taken off over the years. Just take us back. When did the concept of used car leasing kind of first start to germinate? What were some impediments? Why didn't it take off at that time? What were some industry factors at play?
Yeah, so back in the 2000s is when I started getting into used car leasing, and it was a time when it was mostly independent leasing companies all across the country, and we had various associations. I joined the National Vehicle Leasing Association, which I'm president of currently, and that was really where most of the leasing was done, through independents, both new and used. And then we went through a couple of residual value crashes in the 2000s, and then of course the industry had an issue with that crash, right? The industry crash of 07, 08, and that kind of put a kibitz on pretty much a lot of leasing in general, not just used, but also new. And that's where a lot of the OEMs started to step up and start taking over the new car with subsidization and things like that. So, but used car leasing, we were one of the U.S. Bank's largest leasing dealers in the 2000s.
Okay. Well, again, reference back to the cooking analogy. Fast forward to April 2026. What are some ingredients now in play that might make used car leasing turn into something tasty for the industry this time around?
That's good. well done. No, I like that. So actually, there's a few things. One is timing is right with affordability, right? We have an affordability crisis, and this really also transcends into new car leasing too. I know we're used car industry summit, but it also it works on the new car side. So we're talking about affordability issues, and leasing is the perfect solution for that. But there's also a couple of other things going on. We've got the technology now that we're specifically working on that helps bring leasing forward to the buying site, to the buying process. Because if the further it's up funnel, the better chance you have of engaging that consumer and being like, oh wow, okay, we got a lower payment, and they just self-select. And back in the day with leasing, it was always about, people were like, I don't want to do leasing, I had a bad experience. Today, it's totally different. People are used to short-term ownership of whatever, your phone, everything else, right? I mean, how often do we switch phones? A lot, right? So the younger generation is used to that, and the vehicles today are also really, it used to be back in the day, we would not lease a Hyundai to anybody. Now, it's one of the best cars out there. So the cars are better today. So you have a better used car marketplace for leasing.
Well, let's get into the nuts and bolts a little bit, the recipe, if you will. I'll keep hammering the cooking analogies. What are some of the basics in play that make used car leasing work? Perhaps when it doesn't work, what are some of the just rudimentary fundamentals of used car leasing?
Yeah, so the lenders that are in place, and we're working with a couple of national lenders that offer used car leasing, and both new and used, but used car leasing specifically, it is a different type of model that you've got to work through. So having the correct lenders in place where you have national coverage, you've got full spectrum for credit, and then you also have lease here, pay here, which is a whole different model, but it's still there. But having the right lenders, the technology, as I mentioned before, is critical because, again, letting that customer being able to self-select that lower lease payment when they're comparing financing and leasing is a much better option for them, and it's just a natural, oh yeah, I want that. It doesn't matter whether it's leasing or financing. It's the payment is what most people are focused on.
Perfect segue, as you alluded to earlier. Affordability is something that's really become top of mind, whether it's dealers, finance companies, we consumers. How can used car leasing help with the affordability conundrum? Just your overall perspectives on the affordability component that all of automotive is facing nowadays.
Right. So instead of stretching long-term financing to consumers, where that dealer, if we're talking about dealers in this case, when you finance somebody for 72, 92, 30% of the market now, or the number of finance is that many months, you're taking a consumer out of the market for a long time, so you're not going to get a chance to bring that consumer back, but you're also putting them in a very negative equity situation throughout the first few years of the term. So with leasing, you're able to lower the payment, shorten the term, and that way you're bringing that customer back.
Alluding into another component of it all, risk. We're all trying to mitigate risk. How can used car leasing help in the risk component of financing for lenders? How can it help with that part of the business? Yeah,
actually a couple of things. So what you see happening right now, or what you're going to start seeing as interest rates drop, what happens is the refi business becomes a big part of that market now. So what happens is when you finance a vehicle and it gets refinanced, there's on average it's 120-day chargeback. So if that vehicle's refinanced within 120 days, you're charged back your reserve, you're charged back all your products. So it's going to be a very, very bad situation for a lot of dealers that are doing financing, whereas leasing kind of protects you from that refi. The other risk part of that is the fraud, and we talked, fraud's a huge topic over all of our conferences, but the fraud prevention is a very big part of that, because you look at the finance charge-offs, right? We're looking at 20 to 30%, and a lot of that is fraud related. We don't even know really the extent of the fraud that's in those portfolios. So if we're using technology up front to do identity verification, what we do is a one-time passcode to start that, but it's a fraud stack. I mentioned that yesterday in the fraud session we had here. It's multiple layers, and having those at fraud prevention at the very front of the origination is critical to the whole process of the loan cycle, lease cycle too.
Well, you brought up the fraud topic to hammer another recipe analogy. We'll set that ingredient, used car leasing, we'll set that aside to let it rest for a moment and delve more into the fraud discussion. Just as a tech executive, been involved in automotive for some time now, just your overall observations of what fraud is unfortunately doing to the industry, just how much of a challenge it's morphed into, just your overall observations of what fraud is percolating and impacting automotive.
Yeah, it's a major impact, and I think both dealers and lenders are starting to see that. We see it firsthand with what we're working with on the origination side, but I think the whole thing about it is it's not just one piece that's going to protect you from fraud prevention, right? I mentioned the fraud stack, so it's varying layers of fraud prevention that you've got to have, and it's changing all the time, right? So we look at it as a Swiss cheese approach, where each slice of cheese fills a hole so that eventually it can't get through. So the more slices you have, the better chances you have are to prevent the fraud. But it really is important, I think, if you think about the lenders that are actually really holding the bag at the end of the day. Yes, dealers have insurance and things to protect them against fraud, but then there's the issue with the consumer and what's your reputation when you have a fraud deal, right? The consumers are now like, I don't want to work with that dealership because you've had fraud issues no matter what it is. But going back to the lenders, I think the lenders play a bigger role of making sure that fraud prevention happens earlier in the origination. And I'll use Carfax as an example of how that works. So Carfax goes to the consumer and say, look, you've got to have a Carfax report on that vehicle before you buy it. Okay, so now every dealer's got to have a Carfax report, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I think overall it's good. There's other products that can help with that too. But what I mean is, it was presented in a way where you had to have it to make sure that you got a better quality car. Now we want to make sure we're having better quality financing, leasing put on the books.
And as you referenced, we opened this year's event with the fraud forum that focused on the transportation sector, but just whether it's transportation, auto finance, what have you, just how do you see the industry coming together to curb fraud? What strides has it made? What strides do you see that could be helpful to the entire industry if there's more collaboration? How hopeful are you that there's cooperation amongst all the parties?
Over the years, the auto industry usually you don't see that cooperation, right? Everybody puts up guardrails and moats and all that kind of stuff. But I think we are at a point right now where it's imperative that we are working together and collaborating on the fraud prevention side. So, as I mentioned, the fraud stack, right? It's not one company; it's multiple companies. There's also an organization that I'm a member of called InfraGuard. It's an FBI organization. You join as an individual, not as a company, and I think that, and there's different sectors of InfraGuard that provide that collaboration of fraud prevention. There's not specifically an auto sector, but there is a finance sector there. I encourage everybody to kind of check that out and join that. It's free to join, and you join as an individual. But things like that is where I think you're seeing that collaboration. And yesterday's forum, fraud forum, everybody agreed. We've got to work better together.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring that ingredient back off the shelf. Go back to what was the main part of our conversation: used car leasing. To drill down and speak directly to dealerships who may or may not already participate in used car leasing. What do you see as some best practices for a single point store, a dealer group to get involved in used car leasing?
Yeah, so I think again there's education that goes into that, but at NVLA, National Vehicle Leasing Association, we were working on education, but also not about how to do it, but what to do. What are the components? What are the ingredients to make used car leasing work? And that's one of the things I'm kind of focused on, again, as an independent used car leasing company and lender. That is something I'm focused on, to help dealers figure out. We put all the components together. You've got to make it easy. You've got to bring it up front in the buying process. And I think once those pieces are put together, I think dealers will see, wow, this is actually, it works. And there's some captives, right? Honda, I know, is involved in used car leasing with their CPO program. And again, when I talk to different OEMs or captives, it's like, yeah, we've not been able to get the dealers to really to be able to do it. Well, it's because of the process you have to put in place and the tools and the technology to actually make it work. And I think we're going to get there. And I think 26 is going to be a great year for used car leasing.
Perfect segue to wrap up our conversation here on the live stage at the Used Car Industry Summit. Indulge me one more cooking analogy. We're fixing to pull that dish out of the oven, or that piece of meat out of the smoker, whatever it may be. Just how hopeful are you that you mentioned 2026 beyond for used car leasing? How bright of the future might be? How tasty the dish might be?
Yeah, I'm excited about the final product. Right, as my nephew would say, restaurant quality, right? So I think we're getting there to that restaurant quality of used car leasing this year, and I think it's going to help consumers, it's going to help dealers, because you're not talking about price, we're talking about payment, so it eliminates price erosion, and I think it's great for the lenders, because now you're not having these chargebacks off refinancing. It protects the portfolio. So I think all three of those components together is a win, triple win.
Tarry Shebesta, CEO of FlexPath DXP. Tarry, it's always great having a conversation with you. Thank you again for being part of our events that we host at Cherokee Media Group and sharing your expertise. Really do appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Nick, very much.
Thank you so much.
Yep.